Good evening, everyone. This is the Curriculum and Policy Committee meeting. Portland Public Schools, we're just waiting for some folks to join. So we're going to give it a couple minutes here. Let's get started and hope that Vice Chair Bondo will hop on when she's able. So good evening, everyone. My name's Aura Russell-Better. I'm District 4 Portland School Board member and chair of the Policy and Curriculum Committee, which is meeting virtually tonight, August 22nd. And we're joined by our new superintendent, Dr. Ryan Scallon, which is great to have him starting and joining our committee meetings to learn kind of the work we're digging into. So I'm going to turn things over to Deputy Superintendent Erin Townsend just to kind of give us a little overview of the agenda tonight, and then we'll dig in.
Great. Good evening, everyone. Excited to talk through two things tonight with the committee. One is reviewing proposed changes to policy IJJ, the selection of educational materials, and then to talk a little bit about this committee's work plan for the year. So based on our conversation at the end of the year in June, I've put together, from the topics we discussed, a potential kind of work plan. So want to talk that through with you all, see if there's anything else that's come up of interest, so that we can kind of land an agenda for us as we work through the year. So those are our two topics for this evening.
Thank you. And we don't have minutes from trying to remember.
No, we've been doing just the recordings, right? The committee meetings. So
thank you. I forgot about that. Okay. Nikki says she's trying to get in, so I don't. Oh, yay. Perfect timing, Vice Chair. We just kind of touched on the agenda. So you're here. Hello. Good to see you.
Hello, Mickey. Okay, so Mickey, I was just, saying we're, coming back to the library, the, selection policy and the challenge procedure, right, is the proposed changes there. So looking forward to discussing that. And then based off our conversation in June before the board recess, I put together a proposed work plan for the policy curriculum committee. So I want to review that with everybody so that we can use that as kind of our guide for our work together this over the coming school year.
And sorry to interrupt, Erin, but I forgot to mention, so we have member Julian Upperman and Vice Chair Mickey Bondo, and member Bilio, who's on the committee, is not able to attend tonight. So just forgot to mention that. So, okay.
Great.
Go right ahead.
Okay, well, I'll do just a little overview. I know we discussed this in a workshop just last week with the full board, but I think for purposes of the committee and kind of orienting, I'll do a quick review from what Meg had. And, member Bondo, just, Meg had something come up personally, and so wasn't able to join us tonight, but I said we should stick with our time and, we move forward, and I can connect with her based on our conversation. So I'm just going to share the policy here a little bit. This has been what was, what we reviewed with the full board last week, and, what's been part of the minutes. So let me go to the top. So this generally reflects like all of the prior changes that were incorporated in terms of the policy. All of the criteria, and some of the additional language that had been incorporated prior to the October 2020 revisions. And what's being proposed to add to the policy now is what is in red, which is the procedure that we would engage in if somebody did choose to challenge any of the materials in any of our collections. So that's, there. And again, just as a reminder, the kind of complainant shall be first it's kind of at the first level, it's the person providing the materials, so in the case of, kind of library collections, that would be the librarian. If the complaint's not resolved informally there, it would go to the building principal and they would fill out the IJJR2, the Instructional and Library Media Materials Challenge form. And the superintendent's office would be informed, and we would appoint a committee of the following persons to review the complaint: a principal at the appropriate grade level, a library media specialist, a classroom teacher, a department head in the subject area of the challenge materials, and a community member. So educators on the committee will not be those directly. So ideally kind of an independent committee made up of folks from kind of across the organization that would have some knowledge and interest in the matter. So they'll, the committee's charge is then to read and review the actual materials before making a determination. So, look kind of across in terms of checking the general acceptance of materials by reading reviews and other kind of, external perspectives on it, weigh the values and faults, as it says here, and then meet to discuss the material and prepare a report. So the report and their determination will be forwarded to the superintendent, who will inform the complainant. So the decision-making here really lies with this committee. Materials, the last kind of caveat there is that the materials, remain in use until a final decision has been made. The last is just this kind of summary of the library policies, in general here. So I know we've had a chance to kind of discuss this previously last week, but interested if, kind of from that discussion, any kind of questions or considerations about kind of incorporating back this challenge procedure, so that we have a procedure in place in case there is any formal challenge.
Go ahead, Member Upperman.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess the question, I have no concerns about the wording in red. My question is, in the report, is there any kind of a format, because the committee's thrown together pretty quickly, is there any kind of a form or format that protocol that they would follow to review? There may be some out there, and if that's so, it would be good to know if that's what would be used, so that there's a consistency of depending upon who's on the committees. And also just to check in the black section on typos.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we'll do. I will do some reformatting and cleanup.
That's no big deal. I just,
Yeah, there's some. To that question, I'm not 100% sure. I think that it'll be a good question for Meg to see if there is some kind of standard templates, maybe from the Library Association or something like that would kind of guide it. So I'll ask Meg.
It'd be easy to explain, gee, what is the committee going to look at and how are they going to format it? If somebody asks me, and how does this happen? What happens if, kind of thing. Just that clarity. Yep. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Last week, I have some notes here, and I put it was on the IJJ. I have no idea. Do we have the IJJ for the selection of educational material procedure wording of all languages? I put some. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can we go?
Yeah, that's the one we have. That's the one we're looking at.
Okay, so I put number 4. Do we have a number 4 there? I think I was concerning on some other language there. Can you mind to have it on the screen, please?
Yeah, I'll put it back up on the screen. And number 4, let me put it up and then we can discuss. All right, I was looking for a 4. I don't see a 4. I see a D.
Yeah, let me make sure. That's the IJJ, right?
Yep, this is IJJ, the Selection of Educational Materials. Yeah.
There were 2 other forms. I'm trying to get back to mine and see what it looks like.
No, it was not this. It was. Oh, maybe it's the A. Maybe let's go back to the A. Let me see. What's that one? Oh yeah. So wait, now I'm getting back. Yeah. So I mean, what we have those material is something has been a standard for all the libraries from the state, or just for us here.
No, I mean the collections are determined locally.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So yeah,
we just local. So this is why we're going to apply into our libraries.
Correct.
He's not going. So those are core values. Those are our core standards. It's nothing to do with what the Library Act is being seen as a broad rights.
Right. No, yeah, just, the reference to Maine's system of the learning results, that's what they refer to as the state standards that all students must, kind of demonstrate in terms of graduation. But we are responsible for the educational materials, and the program, right, in terms of helping our students achieve that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that was that. Okay. Now I get it. Thank you. So it was not 4, it was A actually. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I guess when Mickey said 4, I went to look at the PowerPoint presentation or the review of that one, and there was a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or whatever, and it was the adoption of the Library Bill of Rights. And number 4 was libraries should cooperate with all persons and groups concerned with resisting abridgment of free expression and free access. I don't know if that was what you were looking at originally. Mickey.
Let me just go into the PowerPoint there. Yeah, that was part of the policy. IJNC was the other policy, and that was what was incorporated in IJNC in the October 2020 updates.
Right, but it's not. It's already there. It's not part of this one.
Yeah, it's already there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The only modification, it sounds like, at that time, it hadn't been intended, but what got published as kind of the board policy didn't have the challenge procedure. So I believe, as Meg said, we haven't made any alterations to the procedure, right? It's kind of just reinstating that language so that we have that published and kind of a clear way to engage, if something happens. But noting your comment, Member Opperman, about, just clarity about what form that report takes, right? It spells out what there should be considering, but
it also helps with meetings protocols.
Mm-hmm.
So are you both all set with any questions? I just had a couple things to say. Yeah. Okay. I'm just really pleased for us to be able to move this forward. We didn't have any concerns or questions at the full board meeting. And, I know this was brought back just to kind of make sure that folks, many of us that were not on the board when the work was done on this, in the last few years. So just want to really appreciate all the work Meg and others did to work on this. And I think just us having this policy in place is huge, for our students and staff to know that we really have a plan in place to ensure that we do have quality materials available to our students and have a process to make sure that we can support that. So I just had a question about sort of educating our staff about it and implementing it. Aaron, just kind of wondered how that would get rolled out, and also maybe the part in the community. I don't know. I mean, more wanting to know kind of for our staff and our buildings, kind of what that might look like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we could work with Meg. Again, I mean, this is mostly, though, I think there are some cases in which, a teacher may be teaching a book, for example, and may engage. We can work on, developing, kind of a little bit of an overview around this that we can communicate out through, our Tuesday bulletin and things like that. To just make staff aware of the things we're doing, just consistent, with our other, I think it would be in line and consistent with, the work we've been doing around curriculum and ensuring we have diverse perspectives, and given the kind of external context, letting people know what our process is to engage and support if there's any kind of formal challenges.
Okay, great. So bulletin just seems like that would go to all staff, or the principals kind of know to then share that with their.
Yeah, our routine is, and probably because it'll really be, principals that are engaging and supporting. I think we would, we have an internal separate, kind of weekly communication, so we can do a little update for principals through that. And depending on the need, we've been fortunate to not have any formal challenges, so I'm hesitant to spend too much time on it, given the number of things we're trying to advance. But just making people it's aware there, and then they can reach out, if any of those issues come up, so that we can guide people through the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just for people to have in back of their mind, knowing this is there. So if and when, hopefully we're not, that it's a tool if we did need it. So okay, great, thank you, Member Opperman.
Yes, Chair. You brought to mind something that if a teacher selects a book or a person goes into read on Reading Across the Nation Day, and they bring a book in, should that book or any of these be reviewed by the building librarian or someone, or is it at the discretion of the teacher?
In practice, my experience has been it's been at the discretion of the teacher. When I've gone in to read on those days, the teacher has like 3 or 4 books for me to choose from. So that, I would say in that frame, there are books within the teacher's classroom library already. She's, I'm thinking about a time at Rowe last year, and she was pulling them off the shelf. And then, but I will also know that there have been some folks that have brought books to read, but they've also discussed that with the teacher in collaboration with the teacher of bringing a book.
But even outside of that situation, if a teacher sees a book at a book fair or down at the bookstore and brings it in, and it's not been one that's been registered within the system, is that something that might be advisable or not to check in? Just not as a formal procedure, but a suggestion.
Yeah, I think we would engage that if there were concerns, certainly, that kind of came to our attention, either from a parent or we had our own concerns. We would, kind of meet and, there's always the opt-out procedure from families, which is a separate policy. So those are, kind of rights families have there. But if it's part of the core curriculum, we have ultimately the power, doesn't rest with individual teachers, but we certainly entrust them with a lot of responsibility within this. But, as this says, ultimately the authority kind of flows to the superintendent in terms of making those decisions. So, if there was something inappropriate, we would be able to exercise that, responsibility.
So. Thank you.
Okay. If there aren't, happy to keep talking about it, but I think what I would propose, and I can, discuss with Superintendent Scallon and Chair Lentz and Vice Chair Bondo tomorrow, but what we would like to propose is, if this committee is, in favor of advancing it here, then, we'll bring it back to the board for a first read next Tuesday. I think given that we had a workshop already, I don't think it'll require a workshop as we typically do when we bring board policies for first read, just because we are, because of the strategy of bringing everybody along. So we would try and do a first read on the 5th and then second read on the 19th.
That's 2 weeks from now.
Thank you. That's great news, Member Opperman. I really appreciate that. That's great news.
Yeah, because I was looking at the
calendar out saying, "Oh my goodness,
do we have a meeting next week?"
No,
it's on the 5th.
The 5th.
No, sorry, I'm already jumping ahead.
He's trying to get out of August.
No, I'd like to slow it down, but it feels like it's barreling forward.
So, Deputy Superintendent, we don't have to vote now. Then here.
I think, if just, we have typically done, some a vote, to move it forward out of committee to the full board. Mhm.
I think just because we've had it a couple times. Yeah, go ahead.
So moved to move it forward.
I second to move forward.
All right, all in favor of moving IJJ proposal forward or amended proposal? All three? Okay, great.
All right.
So it's like all three members that are in attendance voted to move the policy forward to our next board meeting, September 5th.
Right.
Great.
So let's move to the other agenda item. And you guys can let me know if you can see this. I'll talk it through.
Thank you. Nice. I like it big.
Yeah. So in our June meeting, we kind of talked about what work we wanted to do. And so I've kind of organized that discussion. I want to caveat to say I'm meeting with Kate to kind of get our, table of contents of kind of all of the policies and the dates most recently updated. So we're meeting on Friday to try and finalize things. She's been working on some of the policy update work, amidst many other things. So know that we're still working on that. And, for members, we're happy to produce the binders, that we discussed last time, if that's of interest for you as well. So you have those hard copies. So in addition to those tools, we talked about both some areas of kind of curriculum that there was interest in, kind of having on the agenda and reviewing further, as well as potential policy areas. So, in column A there, I kind of just outlined the pieces of the curriculum that came up in discussion. And one more, I added the special ed and specialized programs. I think it would be good to include that as part of the course of our work over the year to build understanding around both, the specialized programs and our continued kind of evolution of trying to, serve those students as effectively as possible. And then the policies that we spoke of. So those are, on the right in column A. So I started to outline a little bit here in, kind of, this space here, how we might, thinking about kind of our capacity of what we have to kind of take up, thinking about, potentially one curriculum topic and one policy piece, kind of per monthly meeting to be able to kind of work our way through it. So, in August, we're taking up educational materials, but would be great to kind of talk a little bit about our SEL curriculum, building off some of our recent conversations and some of the launch of the pilot of the base curriculum. So potentially doing that in September, I was thinking as kind of a launch place. I'll look for input about reorganizing these by dates if there's interest in getting to something further. And I did want to come back to the homeless students policy as kind of our next policy to kind of, we did some initial looking at that at one point last year and to kind of, I got some input from our McKinney-Vento coordinator and one of our other social workers who supports many of our students who are unhoused. So was thinking about that to kind of wrap that work up potentially in terms of potential changes there. And then in October, we'll have kind of initiated the high school design work at that point. So was thinking that might be the appropriate time to kind of update on, the body of work this coming year there. And then in relationship, we have some kind of technical fixes at this point, but just as we're thinking about high school design, it felt like it made sense to revisit some of those just kind of technical changes to the high school graduation policy since the updates were made a few years ago. And then November, kind of monitoring, initial implementation of the ESOL resolution, the credentialing resolution. So giving us a little time to kind of get launched with that work and then provide an update. And more broadly, I included there an overview of the LAU plan. So I think that's something, again, in terms of for board members building some background around, that really is the kind of governing document around our how we provide services to students who are speakers of more than one language. And then hoping by that time we would have done some engagement and can bring forward some potential, proposed revisions and start engaging at the board level or at the committee level around the harassment and sexual harassment of staff policy that we've been wanting to do work around. I wasn't sure. Sometimes December and the transition of the board year and board calendar, and a little bit of a shorter month, we don't always meet. So I just held that as a question mark, but certainly we could insert stuff there. Then January, after the first, half year of launch of the, ELA curriculum, felt like it would be time to do a kind of progress update on the ELA curriculum, and then start to think about the summer programs policy. That was one that, in my review is very out of date and needs to kind of be updated. And as we're thinking ahead to, how we think about summer programs, felt like that would be a meaningful time to begin to engage in that. Then, you can see here just over the couple months kind of coming back, to the high school design and the ESOL resolution as additional topics that, we'll be doing work towards. We potentially could move those later to insert the special ed update. I do think that might be useful before we enter into budget season potentially, but open for discussion around the timeline around these things. And, since our conversation in June, if there are other areas of interest that we would want to be able to include. So, and then lastly, and I see hands going up, but just knowing that we did some initial discussion around dress code and feeling like there are some pieces. Both we engaged some of the Family Partnership Advisory Council at one point, and there were questions raised about that. It has been somewhat recently updated, not during my tenure, but just prior to that. But I do think there are questions raised about the distinctions made between some of the grade spans and so forth that might have value in us cleaning up a little bit. So anyway, that's how I was thinking about kind of organizing the areas of interest that we talked about in June. So open the floor for kind of discussion and organizing this so we can kind of get things lined up to engage.
Yeah, thank you for laying that out. Go ahead, Vice Chair Bondo.
Thank you, Chair. Deputy, I'm kind of a little wonder about on the curriculum topics. Is there any way we can incorporate on the social studies, just some updates on the Wabanaki studies and Africana studies. So where we are right now, and it has been a while, you kind of a little lost on the road.
Yep. I had considered that. I had thought about that, but we have actually been talking about doing a full board workshop at the second meeting in September is tentatively what we have scheduled for that. So I thought just in terms of we'd engage with that and provide an update on Wabanaki studies and local Black history curriculum development to the full board. So
all right, sounds good. Thank you. Yes.
Go ahead, Member Opperman.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder, and I'm not sure exactly what curriculum topic or policy work this would come under, but I have a real concern about knowing if our students are actually learning the curriculum and understanding are we able to, other than the standardized tests, before we get to a standardized test, can we tell if they are improving in reading, and that we, the board, can also know that, so that we know that the curriculum is working as it goes forward. And it's not, and is there a way that we can suggest policy, or because it will affect, if we do any thought on this, it will affect budgeting. So that's my concern. So I guess the idea is that are we able to see if they're improving in reading and writing and arithmetic, history and science, even at the early grades, and that we're not focusing on if they're getting an A or a B, but that they're getting, that they know what they're doing and saying, being very granular about that. I've had parents, I've had a person who works with New Mainers and going between the New Mainer parents and the teachers and them, and another comment from another person who's not a New Mainer, that it's a lot of, hi, your kid's doing it, is nice job, they're getting along, the SEL stuff, which is important, but that they then find out that they really are not progressing in reading. And I worry about that, because maybe that's why I've been pushing that K through 3, small classroom, whatever we can do to help teachers and students work together, so the students know more, know it better. And how do we know that they know that?
Yep.
So how do we do that?
Yep. We have. I think that's by, kind of presenting and engaging around our assessment strategy, and kind of our assessment calendars, that incorporates, kind of from classroom level on up, and, what we do have, why we have what we have, the challenges, associated with kind of the development of that. So, I think that would be a great topic to engage in. I don't know if Mickey, had you guys ever previously in the curriculum committee, when it was separate, done any engagement around assessment strategy?
We just started a couple of years ago some of the learning strategies with the coaches. I mean, that's what we had when we have those vertical team. They really defining some of the learning strategies. Right. Really, really appreciate Priya. She was on the mathematics vertical team, so he was really focused on what need to be done for a student in the classroom to really using those curriculum, the way it's supposed to be done, so that that student can have a high achievement. So that means giving to the teacher the way to really building a learning strategy depending on the need of the student. So that means they really started a conversation a couple of years ago. We had a presentation from the vertical team, and then everything, the crisis came out, and then everything. And I think what member just mentioned, just what we need those assessments. Because before building strategy, we really need to assess what we have done as a result from the vertical team, and what the implementation into the classroom really happened from that case. And then we do the measurement and getting some metrics, which can be the benchmark for success. So I think that's something that we need to overview that. Yes.
Yeah.
My concern is that we do it sooner than later, but I guess when we talk about the assessment strategy and the vision, and making sure there's a solid one in the elementary school, so we don't run into some situations, but we're looking at policy for what is the high school graduation policy. I mean, there are students that are graduating, or I have heard rumors of, and you could know better, Superintendent Townsend, that some individuals are graduating with less than their 12th grade knowledge needed. So,
yeah,
can they read? Can they do arithmetic?
Yeah.
Can I just bring up one other thing? Oh, sorry, Aaron. I love the, having a topic of instructional vision, or for us to really understand the process of assessment, right, that we use. And I'm also just wondering, Aaron, about our new data team, and, will there be, and I know they're, kind of getting together. You mentioned some of the areas, that there had already been tracking, but for them to be able to help synthesize some information and bring to the board. So I don't know how soon that might be that they could do that, but I think that will help us too, Julian, right? When we can really look at the data that we've been collecting to answer some of your questions, like where are students at with benchmarks. So I just wondered, kind of like us being able to get some of that, when they're.
I've been spending time on the Department of Education data warehouse, which is where our reports go from the system. They go up there, and all schools have it. And so we have things on, detentions and suspensions and behavior and academic testing per se. But, again, that's done so rarely, and what goes up to that point. And it's broken down by demographics too. But I've been digging out the stuff, and I just think that's why I think we need to look at the information. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate it. So I will pull my hand down and let some other people discuss that.
Yep. No, appreciate all that. Yeah, I think probably it would make sense to combine the instructional visions and assessment strategy and one kind of presentation. And doing that sooner rather than later is totally doable, because it then puts everything else in context too, because that's really what's driven our choices around curriculum, right? Certainly, think about Malia and her leadership of like, we need to establish what do we believe about teaching and learning? What is, the field tell us, right? What resonates here from our staff. And that's, what board member Mondo was talking about with Priya and math, right? And so it's from there that we've made decisions about assessment and curriculum aligned to that. So, but focusing on the assessment piece, because that hasn't been something, and we definitely have stuff to talk about there. So that would be great. And then that can tee us up as we then bring data forward, that'll sit in context for you all in terms of how we're thinking about the various data elements, particularly the academic data elements is what I'm thinking about. And that's what I hear you asking for, Member Opperman. I think we saw little slices of things when, Jesse and Cindy did the Teacher of the Year finalist, Mr. Chard. If people hadn't seen that news, he was moved to finalist.
Yes, saw that.
Another Portland teacher.
We have some exceptional ones.
Yep. Anyway, just, we talked about the early bird data, that we were seeing progress on and things like that was measuring some of the foundational skills. So that's all part of kind of this assessment strategy to the point of like, what are we looking at along the way before we get to the end of the year state summative assessments to know, what progress we're making, right? Are we implementing the curriculum? Is it seeing results? Things like that. So, yep. I think we're doing a bit of an orientation like that for some of our new leadership, including superintendent. So I can imagine, pieces of that being ready, potentially for September, to prioritize for September instead. So we can move some of this around in terms of the curriculum topics and stuff.
One thing I just wanted to throw out there, Aaron, was, I like the priorities. I mean, I like the priority we're talking about right now. Earlier would be great. I also think the SEL curriculum overview, high school design, the homeless, I think those for the next couple of months are great. I just wanted to point out, I think the ESOL overview and LAO plan, maybe even, I know it's December, sometimes we're not meeting, but just like if we're going to have 2 new board members in December, it might be good to put that off a little later just so that those new folks get that overview, since that's really important. Context for moving forward, that doesn't get missed when people are starting in December. So that's just a thought. And let's see, just the timing of the other.
And we may, just like we're managing, I'll work with the superintendent and board chair and vice chair of like which a wondering might be which of these are more effective as either board focus issues.
Yeah.
Just because we're starting to get more content than we potentially have time and capacity for, right? In this context of this. So, but I really like the visions and strategy one as a place to start as kind of a foundation from the curriculum perspective. And then, maybe it'll make sense to wade into some of those. So we'll talk a little bit about, given that it was board adoption of the ESOL resolution, maybe that does make more sense to do monitoring through, a full board workshop or board focus on educational issues.
Those feel important enough to me that, of course, it's great for us to get into it, but I do think for the whole board to get an opportunity, I think those are so helpful. So I would think of board focus. I support that idea.
Yeah. Great.
Anything else for the topics listed for the board members as far as like priorities or the time frame of the other ones that Deputy Superintendent laid out for the rest of into March before budget time?
All right. I imagine we get a couple of months into this year and we get the strategic plan presented, then, all of these are important, and so we'll see.
Yeah, certainly. It's just written in a Google Doc, so modifiable. But I think from a timeline perspective, it'd be good to map out the year. And when we do the kind of board transitions, right? We do a kind of summary report and thinking ahead there in the kind of November to December timeframe. So that'll be another point, and we'll have moved forward. Certainly not be done with the strategic planning work. So we can certainly modify from there, but. It'll be good to have this roadmap. It's something we've been working towards having for a little bit.
I'm just trying to remember from last budget or the last couple of years, is there anything that's helpful for us to be kind of digging into prior to budget time starting? I mean, I think sometimes just...
Well, that's where I was thinking that was part of what was coming up, and I didn't land it, because I was like, well, we'll just talk about it. But the special ed programs and specialized programs is something that I think would be worth this group's time for a little deeper kind of knowledge and understanding. Certainly where there's been a number of implications in terms of the increases in the out of district costs.
Yeah.
And so just understanding, our strategy and approach as it relates to our specialized programs. And we're looking to make some shifts in that regard, right? We've made some changes to the breathe aid treatment model and things like that. So that feels like one that's both programmatic to, know and understand and has some pretty significant budgetary implications, both in terms of the, potential out of district costs, but as well, that's just a big area of staffing for us.
Yeah.
So that was part of what I was thinking about within that.
Okay. Does anyone feel anything's missing here that hasn't been put on? I mean, I'm glad, Member Opperman, you brought up the assessment piece, so that's going to get added, but anything else that seems to be missing for priorities here?
No, I just wonder, I know that the Superintendent Townsend, that you've been working on getting the policies reviewed and all, and I just didn't know about, I don't know that it has to be a whole meeting, but to just have that update at some point. And, like you said, when you print out the booklets as things are coming, just, the policy table of contents to see, that'll be ready in, I think, September?
Yep, I think so.
I'm pleased. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. And I think by that time we may have a little more information. I mean, one thing I don't have information on yet, but anticipate potentially by September, that can inform any additional policy work is if there's just any legislative, if we need to make updates to particular policies based on the flurry of legislative activity that happened in the first session here. This is kind of the time frame where we end up, it's at this cycle where we end up like in 2019, after that first legislative session, we had a lot of, updates to the compulsory attendance policy, things like that.
So you mean this time of year was when we would get more of the details about what?
Yeah, kind of the MSMA and Drummond, do kind of a review and update. Okay. They've had time to kind of update their model policies based on the new legislative language and that kind of thing. So they typically hold a webinar, for school officials and board officials. I mean, potentially as well about what those updates are and produce.
I attended one for last week from the MEA on what they're looking at, what went through and didn't go through. So.
And are those typically, Erin, like I'm sure we've discussed these before when we've had those adjustments to make, but is there typically at this amount of time before you kind of have to get those? I mean, it might be different per legislation, but is there typically this is how much time we expect till school districts make the changes?
I think it can vary some, which are just kind of expected to update. I don't remember when they changed the compulsory school attendance law, there was an implementation period for that, it was no, now, if a kindergartner enrolls, they must go to school. That was a big change there. But there was kind of a timeline around for example, the workplace bullying one, where the state adopted the legislation and we had a period of time. So in my experience, it's varied.
Okay. So that may,
but some of them are
timing for some things. Yeah.
not necessarily, deep philosophical changes per se. It's like state requirements, like the compulsory school attendance policy was not a big agenda item. It was like, this is the new law, we generally agree. So some of those are a little more technical versus, that's why I put, the harassment policy, for example, is more substantive. I think that'll, we'll want to engage. It's not likely we'll really even do it in one meeting, but just was thinking that at that point, we'd have enough time to have done some internal engagement to bring forward recommendations.
So will that start, just as far as timing for that one, because I hadn't thought deeper about the November plan. So would that be starting soon at the beginning of the school year to kind of like getting the team or, the folks that want to dig into that work? Yeah.
Yep. I've been talking with, Barrett and his team, Julia and Richard and even Tyler, our, student equity officer, are prepared to do some engagement around that.
Okay. Great. All right. Sounds like we're feeling good about a good number of months planned ahead here, and knowing there may be some adjustments along the way, but I'm glad we seem to be in good alignment here about what priorities are. So thanks for doing that, Aaron.
Okay. Yeah. For the next meeting, I'll update this. I'll, turn this into some format that we can include every time in the agenda. So it exists kind of, so as we talk, kind of in that upcoming meeting section, right? Can not just have the dates, but potential topics, and we can have that discussion to make sure if there's adjustments we need to make, that we can do that ongoing.
All right.
Great. Okay. Well, I think, if it does make sense, I really do like the idea of focusing at the next meeting on the instructional vision, just kind of that overview, and then diving in on the assessment strategy.
Yeah.
We'll prepare for that, as well as kind of bringing forward the on-house students policy, as well as kind of the update of what we, the table of contents, so you can kind of review where we stand. I mean, I'll share that whenever we have it done with committee members, but we can discuss it at the next committee meeting.
Okay. I see Chair Lentz just hopped on. I think we're about wrapping up, but you can peek at the Deputy Superintendent just pulled together, and we went over kind of our upcoming priorities from August through kind of March. So certainly, Chair Lentz, if you have any thoughts or additions or, ideas about timing or priorities, you're welcome to share. Okay. It looks like probably just giving some feedback later, she said, after watching the recording. Okay. So unless there's anything else, does anybody have anything? I didn't know if Dr. Scallon had any questions or thoughts just being here. I wanted to say if he had any other areas.
No, I appreciate it. I just taking the opportunity to listen and learn and hear what the work is so that we can continue it. So no, Thank you to Deputy Superintendent Townsend for all of this. Yeah.
And thanks for being here too, Dr. Scallon. Great. Okay. Well, happy to have this plan moving forward. And next time we meet, we'll be into the school year, which is crazy, but it's coming fast and furious, like Deputy Superintendent Townsend mentioned a few minutes ago. So our next meeting, I know, is I wrote it down, September 26th. So end of September. And so if someone would like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting, we can finish up.
So may we adjourn, please?
So moved and seconded. All right. So I think we're all good to adjourn at 6:27. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Good evening, everyone.